Now, is it going to tell me, is it live? Okay, we're live now. That doesn't mean much of anything. So, well, I'll probably be hosting the show myself because my co-host was going to tell me if he was going to be on or not. It is his birthday today, so you'll have to sing happy birthday because he wants somebody foreign to start singing it.
I'll wait for
So,
my cue.
unless you're not a good singer.
Not particularly.
Oh, then we can pretend that you're somebody. Well, we're not going to say that because we don't want to embarrass. We don't want international relations to get ruined or something. But anyway, so thank you for joining us. Not everybody who's watching or watching later, either live or later on, because somebody could be watching this 2 years from now and wonder what the heck this program is. Anyway, this is Polygon Issuance, or episode number 24. We've had 24 episodes of this program. It's surprising we got even into the double digits, but we did. And it took us 24 episodes to get somebody that's not from this country in the United States. So, but he did work in the United States once. We're going to wonder why he did that. Was he like thrown out of the country or something? Or, and in some cases, was he thrown out of the United States? And by the way he's smiling, I think that might be somewhat true or somewhat not. So anyway, we have Nick Miller on. He's somebody. He's a meteorologist for the BBC through the Met Office in Great Britain. He is right now working in the middle of the night because right now we're doing our show at 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and where he is right now, it is, I believe, 1 a.m. London time.
That's right, Jeff. Just gone 1 a.m. And I'm in the middle of a night shift.
Yeah, that means they put I can make a real remark of saying they don't put the good people on at 1 a.m.
Thankfully, we're allowed to work across the output, so we've got about 18 presenters here working. It's a 7-day week, 24-hour day operation, providing broadcast across the BBC output. And we all work shifts as part of that. So I can work a night shift. Some days I'll be getting up and coming in at 5 a.m. Other days I'll work during the day, and other times I'll work in the evening. So it's a big variety.
So it's pretty much you would work a night shift, and I know you work nights for what is it, 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row? I can't remember what it was.
2 nights, yeah.
Yeah, and then what they make you then get up at 6 a.m. and make you come to work again or something?
We always have a bit of a break after night shifts, so we tend to do 2 night shifts. So I've got another one on Sunday night into Monday morning, and then I will be off until Thursday. So I'll sleep during Monday, I'll have my weekend, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'll be back in on Thursday. And sometimes, yeah, you can be back in at 5 a.m. on Thursday. The worst run to do is when you do maybe 3 mornings in a row, 5 a.m. starts, and then you do 2 night shifts after that. So basically you can go a whole week without really ever having a proper night's sleep. But, you know, that's how it goes.
So, yeah, that's... Now, given the fact in my line of work with us doing our online weather stuff, we do weather whenever we're up, more or less.
Right.
We could do severe weather coverage. We've done severe weather coverage this year. We've had a lot of severe weather this year. And we could go 12 or 14 hours straight of nonstop talk, or do blogs and do Facebook, which we think is ridiculous now because nobody sees our posts because of the edge rank. So it's so like nonstop, snap, do all these blog posts. So I can understand why it'd be like a night shift, morning shift here, there, and everywhere. So
yeah, but it's you know, it's great variety, and you never really get bored because you know, you're doing different things, different times of the day, different parts of the week. So yeah, it keeps your interest going.
Now we can make a remark of, for example, in Great Britain, I would assume you probably may have, I'm not sure if you did, possibly the forecast for the Formula One race at Monza that is tomorrow, or in your case, today.
Yes, I've not included that in my broadcast that I've done so far since I've been here, but we will have covered that. And in fact, we have one of our presenters who works in one of the BBC regions who's very into Formula One, and he provides a video forecast for the BBC weather website. So yeah, absolutely, we cover that qualifying practice all the way through to the big race for all the races of the season.
Yeah, we won't make a mention that a certain person who drives a Mercedes is a certain British person, but we're not going to go into Formula One right now because unless it starts raining, then at Monza, and I'm not sure if there's forecasted rain there or not. So
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean Formula One, unless it rains, it's sort of
boring.
no, yeah. When it comes to weather, anyway, yeah, boring.
Especially this year when it's pretty much Mercedes, and then if they crash into each other, then it seems to be Red Bull driven by Ricardo that seems to win, or Ricciardo, or whatever they call it. So, but anyway, not
Yeah.
Formula One. That's not weather related, unless
Um,
it rains. So anyway, we're going to be digging into where you were from, because in this case, where on our other guests, I kind of get a hint of where these people are from, what they do, how they got there, and then in your case, you're like the suspicious person in the fog in London. That's like Sherlock Holmes on Baker Street or something or other. So you're gonna
yeah.
have to tell us how you got into this mess of weather, and then we'll have to dig into why you went to the United States for a time. So
Well,
start off with the beginning.
yeah, I mean the weather thing is actually linked to the United States because as a kid I was extremely interested in weather. I used to take my dad's road maps and uh, make my own weather symbols, draw them, and stick them onto the road maps, pretending to be a weatherman. So I mean, there's something linked all the way back to my childhood. But actually, for a lot of my career until I was in my 30s, I was working as a journalist for the BBC. Um, but I kind of started to think, is there something else that I'd like to do, something else that will take me forward for the rest of my career? Um, and I thought about weather, and I went to the States actually and took a master's degree in Syracuse, television, radio, and film, as a way of just exposing myself to other parts of the media and to think, what I wanted to do. And it was during that time I thought I'm going to really throw myself into weather. And it was at Syracuse at the end of that one-year program, I applied for some jobs in the US as a weatherman. And I thought, well, no one's going to employ this English guy to do weather who'd never really done TV before. But thankfully, a news director in Great Falls, Montana, called me up and said, come and work here. And I spent 4 fantastic years as a weekend weather anchor and weekday news reporter, learning everything about being on the telly, weather. And it was there that I started studying weather and became a meteorologist and took those skills back to the UK after 4 years, and we've been working for the BBC since 2003. So this is my 11th year of broadcasting the weather for the BBC, both regionally and nationally across the UK. So, becoming a meteorologist is actually connected to that USA experience, which really made it happen for me.
So there's probably been a lot of events you've covered both in the UK and in Montana. I'm sure Montana, anytime it's below 0 Fahrenheit, it's like, oh, it's below 0, that's normal. But then
Yeah.
if it's below 0 Fahrenheit in Britain, which I don't think has ever happened unless you're in Scotland,
Yeah, no. I
it'd
mean,
be like, oh my gosh, where's the natural gas or electric heat or whatever? So
it's a huge story when it gets that cold over here. But maybe in Montana, you're right, you take it all the time. And the fascinating thing about Montana was discovering the weather there and the climate. I mean, it's hugely different from what I'd experienced all my life until then. And I remember certainly you have long winters, you very short spring, and then you dumped right into summer where, you've got the heat, and then you've got this extremely brief autumn when you're back into winter, and the massive swings as you go from summer to basically straight to winter, where you can be in the 90s one day. I mean, my first I joined in September of 1999, And the start of September, I was doing these pieces about the heat. We're in the 90s, and then literally a day later, there's a front coming through, and I'm stood doing a live shot near the airport in Great Falls, and it's snowing on me, and the temperature clearly has dropped massively, although it rebounded again after that. But I mean, that's what I remember from the massive swings, the cold fronts coming down, and the plunge in temperature that you could just see dropping rapidly on the thermometer.
And I would expect in Great Britain, because of the Gulf Stream, you're not going to get wide swings, maybe 5 or 10 degrees in Celsius, but not 20 plus in most
Yeah.
cases.
I mean, you get the same mechanisms. I mean, you've got Arctic cold fronts going through, opening the door to that plunge of Arctic air if the situation's right. But clearly, you know, it's passed over a lot of sea by the time it gets to us, and everything's modified to a certain degree. But you know, you still have noticeable drops in temperature. You still have stories that we can tell over here about going from fairly mild weather in the winter to, you know, a big change. But you know, there are some winters where that hardly happens at all over here because we get extremely varied weather. Some mild winters, some cold winters. But in Montana, you can just about, you know, set your calendar and your diary to that process happening sometime in September, and then happening frequently all the way through the winter with prolonged cold spells. Although to the east of the Rockies, you get a lot of downsloping, so where in other parts of Montana the cold will hold on, you do get the Chinook winds, and you get temperatures rising quite rapidly, becoming quite mild for a time in Great Falls. So maybe it's not as relentless as other parts of Montana.
Now, is there any places in the UK that are somewhat similar to the area in and around Great Falls?
Well, I guess anywhere to the east of high ground, really. So there'll be spots in eastern Scotland where you get the downsloping effect of the winds. So you will have temperatures pushed up higher than in other parts of Scotland. So there's a place in the northeast of Scotland around. So there's a county called Murray, and there's a little inlet there we call the Murray Firth, and that part of Scotland is particularly prone to warm downsloping winds that will lift the temperature several degrees higher than you get, you know, in other parts of Scotland without that effect. So I mean, it's the same mechanisms taking place there so I can talk about on the TV here, and it really does link back in my mind to what we experienced in Great Falls. So I mean, yeah, there are similarities anywhere really you'll find to the east of high ground.
So then there's also the infamous that Great Britain is surrounded by water in more cases than not, and you have the northeast breeze coming off the North Sea that could cause weather problems. You have storms coming up from the southwest in the western part of the English Channel that could cause mayhem. You have storms that could bomb out between, say, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and say Iceland, that could just make it so messy. Doesn't that just make you want to pull your hair out sometimes if the weather is so crazy?
I mean, it is. I mean, we talk about it a lot, and some people think it's an excuse for sometimes the forecast not being as accurate as you'd like it to be. It's an extremely difficult place to forecast for. We're not very big for a start. I mean, you can fit most of our landmass within Montana's boundaries. So, I mean, we're not very big. We're surrounded by water. You don't get a good look at the weather systems coming at us because, yeah, while they're coming across the Atlantic, you can see them coming, but, you know, it's coming over water. So your observations aren't fantastic of what's coming at you. So, yeah, it is very difficult to forecast the weather for the UK. It comes at us from all directions, different shapes and forms, depending on what season it is. And there are big challenges in that, definitely.
So has there ever been a time where, and I know it's happened before, where London has gotten snow? Not sure if it's normal that they get a lot of snow, but if I remember a few years ago, London had a really bad snowstorm. I'm not
Yeah,
sure if I remember that right.
yeah, absolutely. I think that was 2 or 3 winters ago and it was particularly bad time because it was before the holiday season, the Christmas season. So it severely disrupted flights from the big London airports. It disrupted the Eurostar train through the Channel to France. There's a lot of people trying to get away, and it just didn't happen, and there were massive queues. And that actually came after a prolonged spell of mild winters. And everybody kind of falls into a false sense of security and think, okay, the climate's changing. We're told it's getting warmer, so we're not going to have cold winters anymore. And then the natural variability in our weather delivered something, very cold, very snowy, prolonged, and it caused absolute havoc. And we've not seen anything like that since. So the subsequent winters have been fairly mild again.
Well, I know here last winter was terribly cold, and I know the BBC mentioned it because I've seen several YouTube videos where they're all going on about how our winter here last winter was so cold. And I'm thinking, well, if British people lived in the United States, they would probably all live in the South because that's reminiscent to the weather there, except in the summer, where
Yeah.
it's hot and it feels more like the south of France. So, but
Yeah. Our winter last winter was very notable because of how stormy it was. We had the wettest winter on record in the UK, and we had the stormiest. I'm moving around actually at the moment, so I'm just going to plug my phone in on charge so the awful doesn't happen and I lose you halfway through this. Let me just plug that in, and there we go. We had the wettest winter on record in the UK, and we had one of the stormiest too. What we had is basically a stalled weather pattern, a stuck jet stream right across the UK, steering storm after storm across us from the Atlantic. And it was absolutely relentless. We've not known anything like it. There were no breaks. Yes, it was mild, but it was just wet and windy all the time, and that carried on all the way until actually early February before things came to an end. So, I mean, that just shows you within probably 4 or 5 winters, we've had a very cold one with massive disruption, and then we've gone the other extreme, had a very mild one, but with a lot of rain and wind that caused massive disruption too. So, one extreme to the other.
now there's like a semblance of some connection with the weather in Great Britain and the weather that happens in the United States. If the United States is so cold, and when we're kind of getting hints that we could be in for some really cold weather and it's only September, if we're going to have another cold winter, would you suspect that let's say Great Britain and maybe even Ireland, or even probably the rest of Europe, could see another one of the winters from last year again?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it is all connected. So you watch developments in the large-scale weather patterns and the jet stream and where the pressure systems are sitting and all that sort of thing. And yes, when we were having some very mild but also very wet and windy weather with a predominantly southwesterly flow, you were in the grip of the so-called polar vortex and all of that kicking off over there. And so, you can follow the sort of the ribbon of the jet stream and the stalled weather pattern with the cold across North America and the mild weather here. So it is feasible that if you end up with that prolonged cold pattern and the weather pressure systems are in the same place, that you're going to end up with a southwesterly flow and a mild winter here. But then again, you can just have it displaced a little bit across North America and then a little bit affecting the UK too, and we could still be cold or more varied than just prolonged mild, wet and windy. Again, we're a very small island, and it just doesn't take much variation in position of jet stream and position of those weather systems to bring us something different.
Now, we'll go to something that you sort of mentioned in some emails that we had back and forth, that you actually work for the Met Office and you're stationed at the BBC. Now, you'll have to tell us and our cast of people that may be listening how that works and whatnot.
So that would be the equivalent then of me being a National Weather Service forecaster who is employed by the National Weather Service but working at your, say, local CVS station. So they would pay the National Weather Service for me to come and present the weather forecast and bring the weather forecast with me, if you like. It's equivalent of that. So I work for the UK equivalent to the National Weather Service, the Met Office, and the BBC pays the Met Office for the data, the forecast, and they pay the Met Office for me to come and present that forecast across its output, and me and 18 of my colleagues. So I guess, I mean, it's a fairly unusual system. There aren't many countries, I think, left that do that sort of thing. But, you know, the BBC being a national broadcaster, which is paid for through the license fee by members of the public in the UK, I guess want to be tied to another government organisation, being the Met Office, and it is the leader of delivering weather forecast and weather information in the UK. So they come together. Historically, it's been like that. Who knows? It may not be like that forever. But since the start of weather broadcasting in the UK, this is how it's been done. All my predecessors operated this way, and that's the way I do it too.
Now, when will compare United States to the United Kingdom. In the United States, there's all these watches, warnings, etc., etc. I assume there's some equivalent, and I've heard it before, that there is an equivalent to, say, a thunderstorm watch or a tornado watch or a winter storm watch, etc., that the Met Office does, and I've heard, and I'm not sure if this is right, it's something like a red something or yellow or some such thing. You'd have to go into this.
Yeah, we have. I mean, the warning situation over here is different in the sense that our weather is a clearly several notches down on what people experience in the USA in terms of the scale of the storms, the potential damage, the impact on life. It's a different ball game. However, we still get severe weather. We can still get severe thunderstorms, bad winter storms, strong damaging winds, and I think particularly what we end up with is a lot of rain in a short space of time, so there's a flood risk in this country. So the Met Office has a warning system. It is done by colours, so they're basically yellow, amber, and red in that scale of rising dangerousness of the weather. There is, in fact, at the moment, a yellow Met Office weather warning in force, and that simply means be aware. And that's actually for northeast Scotland, where parts of the counties of Moray and Aberdeenshire are forecast to have 20 to 40 millimetres of rain on Sunday. That's an inch to an inch and a half of rain that could bring some local impacts with higher river levels, but it's not expected to cause big problems, so it's yellow, the lowest form of warning. You step up from that, you get an amber warning, and that means be prepared. So I guess you're going to have a plan in the back of your mind what you're going to do if you get some impact from the weather. And at the top of that is a red warning, which you don't see very often. I think we've maybe had 2 or 3 red warnings, even in the wettest winter on record last year. So it's unusual to get one, and that basically means take action now. There is danger to life and property. And the ones we had last year were from rapid flooding, and we also had damaging winds as well. So some windstorms up to around sort of 80 to 100 mile an hour winds, and that that can cause a lot of damage, particularly in populated areas, as you know. So those are the 3 levels of warning that the Met Office will issue.
Now, the years you worked in the United States, you saw more warnings than you could probably shake a stick at, and there was hundreds of warnings, and you'd probably wonder why the United States has so many of them.
Are you a bit sensitive to the weather?
Yeah, well, I could just start listing them. This would take like an hour. We have flood watches, flash flood watches. I don't know what the difference is. The difference is flash flooding means it's going to rise quick. Flood means a river's going to rise and may flood. Then we have severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado watches, severe thunderstorm watches. We have winter storm watches, winter storm warnings, ice storm warnings, freezing rain advisories. I could go on and on. It's so annoying. And then if you start getting into marine warnings, which luckily, since I'm nowhere near either the Great Lakes, although I'm not that far from it, but it's not in my weather area, or around the oceans, you talk about small craft advisories, which there seems to always be one, and whatnot. It's like they have to issue a warning or advisory or something for every little thing in this country, and then in Britain it's like yellow, amber, red. Yeah, that seems to be so easy, but then it seems like it's so simplistic.
Yeah, but I think it also reflects, the bigger range of weather that you get in the USA, and again, I think it's several notches up. So, there are potential bigger impacts on people from the weather. And to be fair, also within our warning system, it's slightly different in that flood warnings are separate from weather warnings, and they're issued by a separate organisation as well. So, I, as a weather forecaster and part of the Met Office, we don't issue flood warnings. They're done by the Environment Agency looking after rivers in the UK. So we don't actually get involved in that sort of thing. We wouldn't talk about flood warnings so much on air unless they were significant and they were sort of flash flooding, that sort of thing, and danger to life, where we would start talking about them. But most of the time when there are flood warnings, we won't actually talk about those in our weather forecast. So they're different. So I guess that's one area which means you don't see as many warnings as you would do in the USA.
So if the Thames River is going to flood London, which would be difficult given the fact of the tidal uh, thing, I'm trying to think of
Yeah,
that.
the
I,
Thames Barrier.
yeah, the barrier that's east of London. I doubt the
That's
Thames would flood or at least flood to the point it's going to like engulf the center of London.
Yeah, no, I mean the Thames Barrier was raised several times last winter in the floods, and there were some graphics that we saw showing how London would look without the Thames Barrier based on the amount of water that was expected up the Thames, and there would be significant flooding, there'd be havoc, and there'd be loss of life as a result. So if the Thames Barrier failed and there was going to be major flooding in London, again, that is not the Met Office, our area of expertise. So the way there'd be a lot of coverage of it, it would come from the Environment Agency and their flood experts. We would, I think, probably put those flood warnings at the top of our broadcast, but we, I think, heavily connect them to how much rain we're expecting, whether there's any more rain in the forecast, and carry on doing a UK weather forecast rather than so much going into the flooding and what we can expect, because again, that's not our area of expertise.
Now, when we get to like the short-term warnings, like in our case, severe thunderstorm or tornado warnings, it's not like there's like going to be tornadoes like every day in Britain. I know there's been some, but how does the Met Office work with these short-term warnings where you're only going to know like within 10 minutes and then it's only going to be for like 30 or 45 minutes or an hour?
Well, the short answer is there aren't any short-term warnings. We do get tornadoes. In fact, we get a lot of tornadoes per square mile, if you compare that with other parts of the world. But I mean, they're very weak tornadoes. Occasionally, you'll get some damage. We had some damage in Birmingham a few years ago. We had some damage in London not too many years ago as well. And parts of the south coast of England actually see fairly frequent tornadoes and funnel clouds, of course, in the right situation. So there's all of that going on. There are severe thunderstorms that produce flash flooding and cause problems and travel disruption. We don't do short-term warnings for them, though. There will hopefully be a weather warning out, which will be issued, say, it'll be an amber warning, and it will say for northeast England, thunderstorms are expected to develop. Some will produce flash flooding, 50 millimeters of rain in 1 or 2 hours is possible, and there will be impact to travel. So that, hopefully, that warning is out beforehand. But if there is then a severe thunderstorm that's moving towards a major population centre, there isn't actually a short-term forecast issued for that. There isn't a mechanism for doing that. So the warning's out in the first place so that people expect the possibility of something to happen. So I guess ultimately they've done what they need to do to prepare, and they're not surprised when it happens. But if there's a specific storm developing, I don't think there'll be a short-term forecast. However, we can talk about those and spot those and look at the radar and talk about those in our half-hourly broadcast that we do on the BBC's 24-hour news channel. So they won't be ignored, but there's no mechanism for a short-term weather warning.
Yeah, that kind of makes me not feel safe in Great Britain, but I can understand it because you don't want to be issuing warnings like nonstop, and like our show, the title is based on the what the warnings are like in the United States now, that they're now in polygons.
Yeah.
Because if we had them in like our counties or whatnot, which is the thing below states, as you'd know,
Yeah.
if we used to issue them for whole counties. Well, severe thunderstorms, most of the case, do not cover a whole county, and a
Absolutely.
tornado is so tiny
Yeah.
that it's not going to. So then they issue an area that's like a smaller area, which is a polygon.
Yeah.
I can understand in the case of in Great Britain, you do all these things like whatever. I'd have to start naming things, and right off the top of my head, I could start like there'd be, say, my ancestral home, which I know if I went back in my ancestry that I came from East Anglia, Bury St. Edmunds is where my ancestral home came from.
Okay.
So let's say there's a severe storm heading there. If the British were if the UK Met Office was using the polygon warning, they would only issue it for, say, them and maybe slightly to the east.
Yeah.
But if it had been under the current system, it'd be the Amber Alert, we'd hope. And I won't make a mention that Amber Alert in this country means child abductions, but
Yeah.
that's another story. But but it would cover like the whole area of East Anglia, I'd assume, and maybe areas surrounding it. So it'd be similar to what the United States National Weather Service would use as a watch, more or
Yeah.
less.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to remember that the scale of your severe thunderstorms and our severe thunderstorms are very different. Your cloud heights will be higher. Your energy within the system is higher. Your capability to disrupt and affect life is higher too. The tornadoes here will take a few roof slates off. They're ultimately they're not going to do anything worse than that, unless I guess one day something will happen where we get a bigger storm. But they're part and parcel of just general thunderstorms that are taking place. They're not massively disruptive in a sense that you would tell somebody in advance that a specific storm is moving to an area, rather than just raising the awareness that you're going to see some pretty intense thunderstorms. But again, they're all on a very different scale from what you experience over there. So whether you need that same mechanism to say, look, a thunderstorm's coming to Bury St Edmunds, it's going to rain heavily, and you might see, a bit of flash flooding in the streets, but it happens so infrequently that it's maybe not worth having the mechanism and the investment in that.
At least for the being, like you said, it's a small area surrounded by water. It would seem more sensible there, but if we had that here, people would probably go completely nuts, because we've had several occasions over the years where the warning system was great, but people still died. And
Yeah,
a lot of people, especially in 2011, where there was a lot of people that died in tornadoes.
yeah,
And the warning system worked, but the problem is nobody was getting the warnings because people weren't paying attention. They were using what has been termed as crap apps on cell phones, where they're
yeah,
doing some forecast and they're just assuming.
yeah.
I assume you don't have that much of a problem there with that.
With what? With people?
With people not using Met Office material and using that somebody just makes an app and says, I can do the forecast better than the Met Office.
No, I think most of the apps will take they take Met Office data, or I mean they will take GFS data. They will take reputable sources to do the forecast. Yeah, I mean there are some newspapers that do wild headlines. There's that come out and say we're going to have the hottest summer ever, or it's going to be a week of storms, or it's the worst wind we've ever had coming, and that sort of thing. And they ramp it up to get readers, and it doesn't turn out to be necessarily that way. But most of the apps people have come with reputable information. But I mean the biggest source for weather information in the UK and people getting their forecast is still television and radio with the BBC and those Met Office forecasts. And so, you know, because that's the case, if there is going to be something big coming up, people will get that message, and that's aided by the warning system. So, you know, if there is a rare red warning, when when you're getting into sort of potentially life-threatening weather territory, that will be a big story in our broadcasts. People should become aware of that because of that, and hopefully they'll react to that. It won't be a surprise, but I mean, it's a rare situation when the weather is like that.
Oh, it sounds exciting in the studio today.
I think they're doing a test of the fire alarm. Here we go. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
The emergency voice evacuation system.
Ooh, this'll get the viewers in now.
The emergency voice evacuation system.
This is the final test of the emergency voice evacuation system.
I wonder if that's an actual person that said that and recorded it.
I think it's actually someone doing that live. It's 1:37 local, and I've got a nasty feeling that coming next there will be, attention please, there will now be a test of the fire alarm.
Well, we've had on our shows people driving through drive-throughs at a restaurant and driving in the countryside, and we've had about everything on this program. We never have a normal program on this show anymore. So
good variety.
Yeah. Now all I got to do is find a.
Please.
I told you.
Please. The fire alarm is about to be tested. Please take no action.
No, too bad. Now we'll hear the fire alarm next. I hope it's not.
You don't actually hear it. There are just some lights that go off, so it's okay.
That'll be the best part of the program. The fire alarm goes off and all sorts of excitement happens. So now I've lost track of what we were talking about.
Well, we're still doing storms, I think, but
yeah.
The ultimate message is they're just not on the same scale as they are in the USA, and you don't need the same degree and structure and infrastructure of warnings and all that sort of thing. But believe me, if there is a really bad weather system for the UK, which is unusual, we'll have a red warning, and it will be such a major part of our weather forecast and our news broadcasts that there won't be many people left unaware that something is going on, and they have to be ready for it.
Now we could talk about the infamous Celsius and Fahrenheit. Why the United Kingdom still uses Celsius? I think a lot of countries do, but we don't. Which makes it a little easier because Fahrenheit, it makes it a lot easier to say 70 degrees instead of saying 21 Celsius, because people think 21 means get out the sweaters and coats when you don't need to. So we could go into that for a little bit.
Well, we've not always done Celsius, and we still get comments coming into our email inbox suggesting that we should be doing Fahrenheit, and why do we ever change? And it's confusing, and we should use imperial measurements like we still do for miles and weight and things like that. And so there are still people who don't like us using Celsius from when we changed to it. So we've been through full cycle over here, and we still occasionally in our broadcast we'll link Celsius to Fahrenheit. So when it's significant, we'll say 21 Celsius, 70 Fahrenheit for the older viewers and listeners, so they get an idea of the conversion. It doesn't happen now as much as it did. So when I started 10 years ago, when we were encouraged still to do some conversions for those people who weren't used to Celsius, although originally we went Fahrenheit, then we did centigrade, and then we did Celsius. So we kind of been through the three. It's very difficult for me, having been in the UK, and then to come out to Montana and to do Fahrenheit, and then to come back and start using Celsius again. It takes a lot to get your head around that sort of thing.
but you always can use that -40 is the same in both.
Yes, the lower you go, the closer it is, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always doing conversions in my head. I mean, I can do most of them. It's when you get sort of high and low, then I have to occasionally use an app to tell me what the conversion is.
Yeah, so this person is forecasting the weather and he doesn't know what the conversion is.
That's right.
Of course, in Great Britain, it doesn't get much above, say, 30 Celsius very often, except maybe in the center of London with perhaps the urban heat island effect.
Yeah, we get. I mean, there isn't a huge amount of range of temperature, so the conversions don't tax me very often. But you're absolutely right. I think we made a 32 or yeah 32 was our hottest this summer. Got a feeling that was at London's Heathrow Airport, um, and
That's
we
89.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
thank you very much. And we barely got below freezing really last winter. Um, it's very unusual to go more than about -5 last winter. So I mean, there isn't a huge amount of range, and most of the time we're in the sort of uh, 10 to 18 Celsius range. That's 50 to 64 Fahrenheit range.
Pretty much for the whole year.
Yeah, well, yeah, really. There will be a substantial part of winter where we're in. Winter's probably more going to be. I'd say we're in the 7 to 12 range. So that's what 45 to 54.
Somewhere like that.
Yeah, and you'll add to that in the spring. But I mean, the summer, would be in the I'd say 18 to 22, 64 to 74. 72, 64 to 72. But yeah, you'll get spikes in that in the summer. You get brief heat waves. We managed about a week and a half of heat this summer. It's not very popular heat over here, though, if you get too much of it. There's another thing that is done is called a heat wave warning, which is issued partly by the Met Office, but also by the National Health Service of the UK, although it's only done in England and not any of the other countries in the UK. But that comes out occasionally when temperatures reach a threshold. So it doesn't drop below a certain temperature overnight, it rises above a certain temperature during the day. The threshold is different to different parts of the UK, different parts of England, because in southern England we're more used to the heat than they are in northern England, for example. But we do get those in the summer. And it makes it difficult sometimes because you start talking about, oh, great, it's going to be warm, it's going to be sunny, and after about 2 days of it, these heat wave warnings start coming out. You have to start being negative about it.
So then it would be similar to like the heat advisory and excessive heat warnings in this country, where it's more or less based on the heat index and not the temperature.
Yeah, whereas here it's pretty much based on the temperature. And I think particularly how it doesn't drop too much overnight. And of course, over here, because we don't get a huge amount of heat, we don't have a huge amount of air conditioning. So most people's homes are not air conditioned. Their cars will be. A lot of trains still don't have air conditioning, and we're still building new trains that don't have air conditioning. For even some of the London commuter routes. So air conditioning isn't a major industry over here. Why would you want it to be? Because it's not hot very often. But when it does get hot and the temperatures don't drop very much overnight and the heat stays within homes and there's not much of escape from it, then I guess you have that impact on health, whereas a lot of people in the USA will have air conditioning.
So there's not even air conditioning at, say, Paddington or King's Cross at any of the. That would be. I don't like that idea. That, especially in a heat island, because London, I think, has an urban heat island. Because from what I've always seen, that it seems like London is like the warmest temperature, unless there's some weird thing going on.
Yeah, frequently will be in and around London. So I mean, for example, tomorrow London is forecast to be 22 Celsius, 72 Fahrenheit, but everywhere else sort of around London would be closer to 20, 68. So you get a couple of degrees added because of that effect, definitely. But you won't have air conditioning in the stations. A lot of them are open air anyway, so I mean,
yeah,
the air's coming in. But there are trains that don't have air conditioning. One of the major commuter routes that runs out of London Paddington into the west of London, those commuter trains don't have air conditioning, so you just open the window to try and let some fresh air in, but quite often it's hotter outside than it is inside, so that doesn't make any difference. And of course you've got the London Underground transport system where there's no air conditioning in those as well. Particularly the deep underground lines, the ones that just run a little bit below the surface and come out onto the surface, they've got some new trains now with air conditioning, but the ones that go deep underground don't have air conditioning, and it's very hot down there. And those are where the problems are. And there are frequent announcements in the summer saying, if you're traveling, please carry a bottle of water with you, and if you do feel ill, don't stop the train in the tunnel by pulling the emergency cable, wait until it gets to a station and get off, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, heat can have a big impact in a country which isn't really prepared for heat, as cold weather can have a big impact, because we're not really that prepared for cold weather either.
So there's no heaters either. I would assume there would be, given the fact that it does get cold there more often than getting hot.
There are heaters, yes. We do heat, we just don't cool things down. So the trains do have heat. That's right. Although, if you take an underground train, which sometimes on parts of the network run above ground, when you get to a station, the doors are opened by the driver rather than you actually manually pressing a button, and they stay open for the duration of the station stop. You can't close them. So you've got a train which is being heated, but you get to an open air station and it may be -5 out there on a cold morning, and you open the door and all the cold air kind of floods in and you can't do anything about it. That's just the way the trains operate. So maybe we haven't got our head around the idea of weather extremes too much in this country yet, but we don't get exposed to them very often.
I would assume you've run into that problem.
Yes.
Because in and around London with taking trains and whatnot, whereas I'm in the middle of farm country, we have to drive everywhere. There's no trains, no nothing. And since I'm in the middle of farm country, corn, soybeans, whatever, we get a lot of the corn crop. There's a corn crop not far from me, and you get all the heat coming and humidity coming up, and you can just think it just has to be so unbearable here, especially during the summer when the humidities are so high. And then I don't think, what is it going to come off, some pasture or something of grass where you could get real warmth or something?
Yeah, I mean it's to do with which air mass we've got coming for the UK. If we're getting a lot of continental heat coming our way, that's where we probably get the highest temperatures. We do get humidity coming up from the south as well. I mean, we're so small, we don't really generate too much of our own weather, if you like. We just wait for it to come from somewhere else. But the humid stuff, again, it's still not on the scale of what you have over there, but that's particularly unpopular when that arrives in the summer, and that's when people then start yearning for a thunderstorm to try and clear the air out. And we have a saying over here, I think it's like 2 fine days then a thunderstorm sums up our summer, really. So you get building heat for a day, the humidity builds, and then you get a big thunderstorm and it all wipes away. You get the fresher air mass coming back.
Or they could always say, if you get the continental heat, they can always say, we'll blame France.
We do like blaming other people, mostly for our weather. So we will quite often blame what's happened in North America coming our way. We get former hurricanes coming to the UK. You can't actually get a hurricane in the UK because the water isn't warm enough to support them around, but you get remnants of them that have become extratropical. So earlier in the summer, I think end of July, start of August, we had ex-Hurricane Bertha come all the way across the Atlantic to us and actually delivered a major shift in the weather pattern. And following on from that, August turned out to be quite a wet and cool month. And then we had former Hurricane Cristobal that went up towards Iceland, again shifting the weather pattern, and it dragged up some warm air from the south across the UK, big area of high pressure, and our weather settled down. It's been fairly quiet ever since. So, we do look to the west Atlantic, to what's coming off North America. Then if it's hot, we'll blame heat coming in from continental Europe. If it's cold, we'll blame Siberia. We'll have a go at the Arctic. If we get big thunderstorms, we'll blame Spain. So, we're quite happy to point the finger just about anywhere. But then again, that's because we don't really have our own weather.
So, yeah. And right now, there's nothing in the Atlantic tropical related. A few little possible disturbances, but the models have been showing it's going to get active in the Atlantic again. So more weather coming possibly into the UK again.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's. I mean, it always gets. The newspapers will bring out the headlines and they'll go, hurricane heading to the UK and all that sort of thing. And we had famously, 1987, a huge storm that hit the UK, caused massive destruction as well across southern England, with thousands of trees down, some loss of life as well. And there is a famous moment on a broadcast the night before that happened, when one of my former colleagues, who's now retired, called Michael Fish, did a bulletin and said, some people are saying that there's a hurricane on the way, but don't worry, there isn't. And then the next morning there was complete devastation across southern England. It wasn't a hurricane, because, as I say, you can't get hurricanes, as still hurricanes over here. It was just a rapidly deepening area of low pressure that had come up from France. But he never lived that down. It was a major embarrassment to the Met Office, because it just really wasn't forecast very well until the last minute. But the last minute was when people were asleep and not expecting what they woke up to. So, the hurricane word, whenever we mention the hurricane word now, it comes with a lot of baggage, if you like, in the UK because of that moment from 1987.
So there's a lot of blunders by the Met Office, and I know when we did our test yesterday that the Met Office tends to, and I put this nicely, tends to mess up the forecast, especially, I don't think in the first couple of days, but further out. I know from videos that I've seen, you typically do 7 days, I believe.
Yeah.
Maybe 6.
Yeah, I mean, in defence of the Met Office, in defence of forecasting now, I mean, that was a long time ago in 1987, and things have changed. And the weather forecasting now is actually very accurate for 1 and 2 days. It's much better than it's ever been out to 5 days, and we typically do 5 days. But we've now got a new broadcast that we do on an evening, which goes out to 10 days. So it will do 5 days in detail, and then it will do the trend for the following 5 days, having a look at where the pressure patterns are, giving an idea of the sort of thing we might expect after that. And that, is quite a step forward, I think, in confidence in the ability to give a steer on what's coming up 5 to 10 days out. And the detail of the first 5 days, sometimes it's nailed on. Sometimes you can be really confident, this is what's going to happen day by day. If I do a forecast on a Sunday evening going out to Friday, sometimes when we get to Friday, I look back and think, every day has been pretty much what, we were saying it was going to be. Other times you do it, there'll be a lot of uncertainty, and you just talk about that in the broadcast and say, look, from Wednesday onwards, 1 or 2 or 3 things could happen. We don't really know yet, but we'll keep you updated as we go through the week. That's being honest with the viewer. But actually, the Met Office forecasts have come on a long way, and a good reputation for particularly good, 1 and 2 day forecasting, better than ever out to 5 days, and now we can give a fairly good steer out to 10 days as well.
Would you go further than 10 days? Because there's some places in the United States that are having the audacity to go out 30 and 45 days now.
Well, I think you can do that if you're honest with the viewer about the confidence in what you're talking about. I mean, there is a monthly forecast which is done by the Met Office. So they do 5 days in detail. They do then days 6 to 10. A guide to that, which we talk about in our broadcasts. But then there's the following period as well, out days 10 to 30, where there's sort of ideas offered on what might happen. That is a genuinely thought about and delivered forecast at the time, which will have a differing degree of confidence each time about whether it will happen or not. And I think if you're honest with the viewers, and if you wanted to do a forecast out that far and said, look, beyond that period for the rest of the month, we have an idea that it might do this, but you have to raise awareness that it might do something very different. And I think it's probably more likely to do something very different in the UK, given how small we are, given where our weather comes from, given how quite often you can't observe it very well before it gets here because it's coming over the Atlantic. So I think there are more difficulties doing that over here than there will be for doing that in North America, where I think you can get a better steer longer out into the future about the trends that may be developing. But you've got to be honest still and say, look, this may well not happen. And if I'm trying to say that this is absolutely nailed on out to day 30, then I think that's being a little bit foolish and a little bit, I don't know, trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the American audience.
So we could get into what kind of models you used, for example, in the forecast you did today. We'd love to see, because a lot of people in the United States especially go off on the GFS because it's a horrendous model, it gets everything wrong, and the Euro is the best model. And so since you are in Europe, even though you're not in the Euro, and we're not going to get into that, but which model do you more use in your forecasting?
Well, I mean, these are the Met Office models, but they take into account other models. So the forecasters will look at what the Met Office global model is turning out for UK and world view, and then for a more tailored UK view, the UK Euro 4 model, which is the lowest resolution model for the UK on offer that we do our point forecasting for the UK. So they will churn out our forecast fields, if you like, for the short-term period, and then the global will take over and look further out to the future as it does. So we'll look at those, but they will be altered. The forecast charts that we get here will then be altered to take into account what other models are doing. So, for example, if the UK global model is suggesting, on day 4 we're going to have a big area of low pressure sat to the northwest of us, but the GFS is suggesting it will be a much weaker area of low pressure, it's going to be in a slightly different place. Well, it's up to the human forecaster to kind of look at that situation, weigh up what other models are saying as well, see the consensus, the ensembles, and then maybe make an alteration to our forecast charts and what the global model is saying based on what the others are doing as well. The global model sometimes might be an outlier compared with, say, the GFS and other models too. So, that process happens where the Met Office is based in Exeter in England, and we end up with the weather charts coming our way. So this is one I'm showing it in front of me now, which is which is our output for the rest of the week with high pressure across the UK. So we get charts like that, which we use to do our broadcasts, and they're issued. The ones for out to 5 days are issued twice a day, and the ones that are for the next sort of 24, 36-hour period are issued 4 or 5 times a day. They're updated whenever, basically. So those are the charts that we get on our computer system once the forecasters have come up with that in Exeter, and we use that here to refer to when we do our broadcasts.
Now, I know in the United States, everybody uses the GFS or the Euro, and nobody seems to want to use the UK Met model, as it's known here. I don't know why that's the case, but
no, give it a go.
I've used it because we can only get it in some areas because some places don't show it.
Right.
But I've seen it, and there's certain times that it would be completely odd or completely way off base, and there'd be other times that it'd be close but not quite right. So
you can say that about any model, though, can't
pretty
you?
much, because they're like because when there's in this country, the Canadian model is pretty much useless in the summer. It's only good in the winter because it's too messed up. It's Canadian. But anyway, we make fun of Canada because they bring cold weather here, and we don't like that. So
now
all you'd have to blame is Greenland or Iceland or the North Atlantic or North Sea. But
yeah. I was going to show you. I can't get my computer to spring to life here. I'll work my mouse around. I was going to show you the charts that I'm looking at on my Met Office computer.
all I know is the GFS, when I last looked on Friday morning here, which would be September, what day would that? The 12th, and Saturday morning, September 13th, that morning, the GFS has been projecting lows at or below 0 Celsius or 32 degrees in my part of the state of Iowa where I'm at. And I'm thinking it's interesting to note the earliest frost we've ever had here is September 15th, and that was a couple of years ago.
Really?
And if we're going to have frosts on the 12th and 13th, I would make a mention our corn crop is still green.
Yeah.
Because it was planted late because we had a wet spring. We could end up losing some of the corn crop. Maybe. It's just starting to turn brown now. When it turns completely brown, it can be harvested. So you can't do it when it's still green because it's not going to be quite right.
That's going to have a big impact. And I know that in Montana, I think the average first snow in Great Falls is around about the 19th of September. So it may be that it's coming early there as well. I mean, it's quite an incredible, to think about that happening at this stage of September, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and typically our first snow, because I'm only at about, if my elevation is right, I think I'm at about 800 feet above sea level where I'm at.
Right.
So, and we get our first snow here roughly, if I was to take a guess, around the 1st of November, sometimes
Right.
around the end of October, early November. We've
Wow.
had snow the first weekend of October. One year we didn't get our first snow until the week before Christmas.
Right.
And I can remember this, and then a lot of the people have said that I talk too much if I start going off on stories, but there was a couple of years ago when I was in high school, back in the 90s, we had this really big heat wave in October where the temperature hit 90 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 weeks later, we had about 7 inches of snow. The trees still had all their leaves on it because it had been so warm that they hadn't fallen off. So what happens when trees still have their leaves on it and you get 7 inches of wet snow, all the trees start coming down.
Yeah.
I had no school for 2 days because it was a mess. So the weather can get that violent here.
In Montana, that would happen from one day to the next. Let me show you.
Ooh, I know these maps. I've seen videos.
This is what I will show on television. Actually, this is our pressure chart for Sunday. You should be able to see an area of low pressure northeast Scotland, bringing that rain for the yellow weather warning that I spoke about. And that big area of high pressure out to the west is the one that's going to come in as we go through the week and give us another week of dry weather in the UK. This is the pressure chart that I've used in my broadcast overnight, going out on our 24-hour news channel.
You need to send that low pressure to Norway.
That's where it's going, and there's a lot of heavy rain happening in southern Norway as we go through the next few days. Because interestingly, part of the job that I do here is that the BBC broadcasts domestically, but it broadcasts around the world as well. We do broadcasts not just for the UK, but for the BBC's global world news channel. It's called BBC World News. You can pick it up on some cable and satellite systems in the US and in Canada. And actually, if you're watching that probably in the next 10 hours or so, BBC World News, you should be able to see some of my world forecast that I've done, because already this evening I've done probably about 16 recorded bulletins for our world output, where I've been doing forecasts talking about a cold front sweeping through southern Australia, possible tropical weather development, cyclone development to the south of Japan, flooding rain in northeast Pakistan. What else we got? Rain heading into Spain and Portugal. I've talked about that really active week of weather you've got going on in North America with the cold front and the plunge of cold air following on behind. So I've done all of that so far today, as well as talking about the UK weather.
Now I'm trying to reach over to turn on my lights, and then I just realized my lights are not working. Just a minute. Because it gets dark in here real fast when the sun's gone down, because the sun has gone down now. So
I'll show you.
That 12, we need to get rid of that.
You see, that's with the wind and rain in northeast Scotland. And you can see London poking out with the 22.
I like how the Channel Islands, which are so close to France, get a temperature. I know it's part of Britain, but it's like, oh, we'll just put a 22 in the middle of the channel.
They pay their license fee for the BBC, so they get a temperature disc on their islands, and they do get a bespoke BBC forecast for them as well.
Yeah, I don't know if Jersey or Guernsey would want. It's like, I don't know. And then I've when I've watched the stuff, I'd start going, well, why does that town get one? Are they like special? Is that where Nick Miller's from? Does he get it? Does he get to choose?
Do not get into the thorny subject of whose town appears on the TV weather map. You know, we've spoken about severe weather impacts from that, whether you should have short-term warnings. What people really want is their town on the weather map, and if it's not there, they let us know. And some that are there, they say, why is that there and not? And I'll show you the go back to that map there. So those are the places which appear on our national weather map on our TV graphics. So there aren't that many really, and there's a big area from Newcastle to Birmingham, which there isn't a place on there, and people frequently do come and tell us, you know, why have you not got many places? You should put Manchester on there, and you should put other places. But I mean, ultimately, the more text you have on a map, the less you can see the weather that we're trying to portray. So that would be the argument.
Yeah.
We put a few noticeable places on there, but you don't want every single place on there because you won't be able to see any of the weather.
Or it'd be like a big mess, because there'd be some places, especially if they did a national map of the United States and put in every town, say over 100,000 people, you wouldn't see anything. Because there's a good 290 some cities over 100,000 people in the United States, and a lot of them are suburbs of big cities. So it'd be like you'd see clumps, and it'd be a mess.
And that's something interesting as well. In the USA, they don't really do national forecasting as such on your networks. I mean, I know the Weather Channel is there, but you get
they don't do forecasting either. That's a thorny subject for us Americans, but
you get national forecasts on your breakfast programs, but you know they're very quick. But ultimately, you know, a national forecast, how useful is that? I mean, there aren't that many people traveling from one side of the country to the other. I mean, some people are doing it, whereas here, you know, you can go from London to Glasgow on the train in 5 hours. So a national forecast is still quite important because, you know, it doesn't take long to get from one place to the next. So a lot more people, I think, are moving around, and you can see the progression of weather from one place to the next. But the national forecast still has a big role to play in how we tell the weather story in the UK, less so certainly than you do in North America.
But then the same would go for somebody who wants to get on a plane at London, Heathrow, and fly to Los Angeles. There seems to always be some multiple flights going to Los Angeles from London Heathrow, or New York, or elsewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people doing that. But then again, there's space on our website where you can get forecasts for other places in the world. I've done a whole set of video forecasts since I've been on shift. So you click on our website over here. You have to be in the UK to do it, but you click on that and you key in the forecast for, say, Los Angeles, and you'll get a 5-day forecast there, but you'll also get a link to a video forecast as well for the latest weather across North America. So, you know, there are places to go where you get not just what's happening in the UK, but anywhere you like in the world, or just about.
I could get on you for asking what the current weather is in the United States right now.
Well, you know, we tend to do the forecast for the next day or the day after that, actually. But I've done the forecasts for Sunday, or I've talked about what's happening on Sunday. And of course, you've got that tropical-ish disturbance towards the southeast, which is going to run up the east coast, taking some heavy rain with it. You've had the storms in the northeast, but they're clearing away, so Sunday's looking much better. Same for eastern Canada. You've got a few of those storms popping up in the desert southwest and through the Rockies. West is looking fine, though. You've got the beginnings of that next weather system, which is going to change everything in Canada. I noticed some heavier rain and some snow on its sort of northern flank moving through Alberta, I think on Monday. and
Yep.
that's it's that's going to dive south as a cold front and bring the cold air behind it.
Yep,
How am I doing
that's
so far?
yeah. And then you skipped Hurricane Norbert.
Hurricane Well, it's Mexico, really, isn't it?
It's heading up Baja right now.
Heading up the Baja, set to move inland as a depression, if that.
If
By the time
that, and then it's
uh,
going to become a monsoonal. It'll go into the monsoonal flow. There's a bunch of flash flood watches because
yeah,
if it rains an inch in the middle of, say, Phoenix or Tucson in Arizona, it
big deal.
floods.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
An inch of rain or 254 or 25 millimeters or whatever it is. I always get this on millimeters, and I'm thinking, okay, I have to start calculating because I know 2.5 centimeters is 1 inch. So then I'm thinking, okay, millimeters, and it's like, I don't like this millimeters thing. I'm thinking
It's an odd thing as well because we'll still be talking about millimeters when we're up to 150 in this country, whereas I don't know why you can't just say 15. That's 15 centimeters, or is it 1.5 centimeters? What's 150 millimeters? 15 centimeters or 1.5 centimeters?
well, wait a minute.
15, isn't it? No,
Milla
it's
would be
1.5.
1,000. Centa would be
See?
100.
This is the trouble you get into.
Yes, I don't like this. You need to go back to inches.
Inches would suit me. I am since I've been in the USA, inches work for me. And whenever I'm talking about millimeters, I have to do a little thing in my head to even get an idea of whether that's a lot of rain or not. And just that conversion to inches or thereabouts, I think, oh yeah, that is quite a lot of rain. Yeah.
Yeah, because I follow some people that are in other countries that use the millimeters, and they say there'll be 20 millimeters of rain. I'm like, is that a lot of rain? I don't know. I'm thinking I'd be lucky if I'd be happy with like for example, yesterday I had about 4/10 of an inch of rain, which is
Right.
good for us, except now we kind of don't want the rain because we had a whole stretch of 3-4 weeks where it didn't rain.
Right.
And we started going back into drought. And I'm not sure if we could talk about that before we get off because you've been on for over an hour. But it's
Really?
like you're foreign and it's the middle of the night and nobody needs you. So at this point of the night, it's not like there's somebody needing weather right this second. But
Well, if it wasn't a Saturday night, I would have had to stop to do one radio broadcast, and then coming up in an hour from now, there's actually a sort of middle of the night weather conference a telephone conference, which is hosted by the forecasters in Exeter, where the Met Office is based, and all the forecasts come out of the Met Office there, where the night's chief forecaster will be talking about the weather to come for the next few days. And then there is a longer range forecaster that will be giving a briefing about what happens in the longer range forecast. And then all the different sort of Met Office departments around the country will be offering their thoughts too. So that's in the middle of the night. And then by about 4:30 a.m., I'll be waiting for the shipping forecast to come through, which is the forecast for the waters around the UK, which I'll be reading out on a radio station at 5:20 in the morning. It takes 9 minutes to read it, and I have to finish exactly on time at 5:30 a.m. after 9 minutes of reading. So that'll be the last thing I do before I go home to bed.
that sounds incredibly boring. Can you imagine the shipping forecast for the whole country, I assume?
For all the waters around the country, yeah. There are sort of big areas of water quite a long distance away from the UK, and we also then start talking about the inshore water, which is basically the water around the immediate coastline. So sort of two different areas to talk about, and we make that last 9 minutes.
That sounds Can you imagine doing that, let's say, for the entire United States waters? That wouldn't take 9 minutes. That would take like 90.
Let me give you. I can give you a taste of it. If I.
It is something to do with nautical kilometers. Because I know here they use nautical miles.
Yeah. Here we are. Coast and. Let me click on this for you here. Shipping forecast. So this would be. So the areas around the UK are split into different names. So I would be saying things like The general synopsis: low, German Bight, 1011, expected fair isle, 1008, by 1800. Low, just west of Fitzroy, 1005, slow moving, filling, 1006, by same time. High, just west of Rockall, 1022, slow moving, intensifying, 1023, by that time. Make any sense of that?
That's incredibly boring. All they would say, from what I've heard, because we don't get these since our Weather Service office is inland and nowhere near any of the lakes, they'd say seas 2 to 3 feet, light chop, or they'd give you like wave lengths and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, that was the general one. We then split that down, and so, for example, we do the sea area called Viking, and we go cyclonic 4 or 5. So that's obviously cyclonic winds, force 4 or 5 on the Beaufort scale, increasing 6 at times. And then we'll do sea state, which we'll call slight or moderate. So those are your, I guess, your wave heights. And then we've got weather, thundery rain, then showers, and then we talk about visibility, moderate or good, occasionally poor.
Yeah, that sounds weird.
Boring. I've got to read that for 9 minutes. It's but ultimately, again, it's another purpose of the Met Office is to, I mean, we're surrounded by water, fishing and seafaring activities, a major thing, and that's how the Met Office started, by giving marine forecasts and to prevent what were extremely frequent deaths of people on boats around the UK 100, 200 years ago. So, the whole purpose of starting to do weather forecasting and developing the Met Office was about delivering forecasts for those people at sea. And what we do now for land forecasting is just an offshoot of the impetus to try and save life at sea. And so we still do these forecasts where, those people who are out, wherever they are around the waters of the UK, get an idea of whether there's something nasty on the way or whether it's okay to be out there.
Yeah, but at least here we don't run into we just have the marine forecasts are so boring, and I'll get to this one last thing before we'll kind of start to wrap this up. In the United States, as you know, there's weather radio. Yep. Where it's just weather. Does the BBC, or not the BBC, does the Met Office have such a thing, and if not, why not?
The answer to that is no. And so on your weather radio, is that different from the NOAA weather radio?
That would be the NOAA weather radio.
Right. Yeah. But that only is there something on the NOAA weather radio all the time? Or is that only broadcasting alert severe weather?
No, it broadcasts forecasts and the current temperatures and the current regional temperatures, and then it tells you the forecast for, gosh, how long, because I haven't listened to it in a while. I could turn it on, but it's clear across the room right now.
Okay, no worries, I get an idea of that. So,
and it's in computer. It is not, there's no person. It's just all automated.
It's not the recorded voice of Jim Cantori, is it?
No.
No. No, we don't have that over here. But I guess that's part and parcel of the whole idea that our weather isn't that interesting, that severe, that full of impact, that you need to hear about it all the time. The most we've got is a 24-hour news channel that does a weather forecast for the UK every half an hour. So, I mean, you're never too far away from getting a forecast. But I'm not sure there would be a big audience for having constant forecasts available on a radio, and increasingly so online is taking over now, isn't it? Online and apps, so that you can access the forecast whenever you want. You just do it on your phone, you do it on the computer, but if you want a TV forecast, you don't have long to wait.
Yeah, and I know that Environment Canada has weather radio, and I thought the United States was boring. When I'd listen to weather radio in the United States, I could fall asleep because it is so dull. Environment Canada, it's so worse. Not only do they have to do the forecast in English, they have to do it in French. It doesn't matter where you are. If it's Quebec, I can understand. But if it's the middle of Saskatchewan or Manitoba, it's in French.
I can
And
understand how that might lull you to sleep, as my shipping forecast might do certain people on the radio at 5:20 this morning.
yeah, the people that have been trying to sleep all night and they finally do.
As long as we're serving a purpose, we're saving lives at sea, and we're also helping people to snooze as well. Actually, a lot of people find the shipping forecast a very soothing piece of radio, and when it's read out at about 1:45 in the morning, midnight 45, they do play a piece of music before the shipping forecast. It's called Sailing By, and I think that also acts as a bit of a lullaby to people too. So, if our forecasts serve a purpose, whether it's alerting people to what's happening or maybe sending them off into a snooze, it's a purpose fulfilled.
Yeah. So before we let you run off to do a shipping forecast to make people in Britain fall asleep for the rest of the day on Sunday,
Okay.
we're going to do our shout outs. Now, I never told you about this, where we shout out anybody, any person, any Met Office worker that you don't like or whatnot. And since I'm going to let you think about it, I'll do mine first, which I
Okay.
don't remember what mine is. I could probably look around my apartment that I'm living in and look up stuff, because I'm right now in my living room with the light in my hallway on, because the lamp I remembered I'd unplugged when I moved my laptop, which I'm on, over into the other room. So it'd have to be one of my weather books that's in my bedroom that I can't remember what it is. So that's what it is. So it's something that I don't know. So I'll put that up on my Twitter account or whatnot. By the way, for anybody that wants to follow the Mr. Nick Miller, he's at Weather Nick, by the way.
That's me. All followers welcome.
And I don't follow you on Twitter yet.
Oh.
That's sad. I'll fix that later.
Please.
So you can do your shout out. Shout out any of your colleagues, whatnot, or shout out some restaurant. Last week, or was it a week or last week, or no, it was 2 weeks ago, we had a restaurant shouted out. We've had everything shouted out. So
in terms of, a person, is that what is that?
A person, a website, a book, David Cameron, I don't know.
I will shout out Martin Young, who is tonight's Met Office Chief Forecaster in Exeter. He is a stand-up chap, very, very nice chap. He's worked there for longer since I've been there, and he, along with not too many colleagues, there aren't too many people hold that role, do way more night shifts than I do, will work long shifts, and they are the people responsible for sending out the forecast charts, which we print off here and use for our broadcasts. They're the ones responsible for poring over the different models and what they're saying, comparing them to what the Met Office's model is saying, and coming out with the forecast. But more importantly, they're the ones who work so hard to brief us as broadcast meteorologists with the weather story to go out onto the BBC, whichever platform we're going on, radio, TV, what have you, to deliver the best message possible, and they give us feedback as to how we're doing and how we can change that to make it even better. And Martin Young certainly is one of the best of those, and is currently, no doubt, poring over the charts before he hosts the Met Office conference coming up in 45 minutes time at 10 minutes past 3 local time, middle of the night. So Martin Young and his colleagues at the Met Office, chief forecasters.
So pretty much you're sucking up.
Jeff, we haven't spoken for long, but you know me too well.
See, I have my ancestral English in me, so, and that's like 10 generations back, mind you. So
you should have lost it by now.
Yeah, but I don't like tea and crumpets.
So it is going then.
So yeah, but I don't like. My father likes tea, and that's where my English ancestry comes from. It's on my father's side. So.
And everyone likes crumpets, surely.
Yes, but I don't know what they are. I like tacos, but that's Mexican food. So.
In fact, the USA doesn't really do much of that kind of doesn't really do many of the things that you toast other than bread, does it? I mean, we do a lot of things like crumpets and hot cross buns and pikelets and muffins, and very different from the type of muffin that you have in the USA that we shove in a
You mean
toaster. Toast.
English muffins?
English
They
muffins.
they have them here.
Oh, okay. We toast. Do you have hot cross buns?
What are those?
No, exactly. Fruited buns with currants or sultanas in that you
Ah,
slice in half, you put in a toaster, and you put butter on. Very nice.
yeah. And then when you went to Montana, you're like, they're not here.
I know. It was actually quite difficult to get used to the trip around. I used to shop at Walmart on a Friday night after my late weather bulletin. About 11 o'clock, I'd be wandering around Walmart. And it's a very different experience. Cakes and pastries and bread is very different in the USA compared with the UK.
At least, yeah. Do you shop at the UK equivalent of Walmart?
Um, well, yes. Well, I think Asda, which is one of our chains, is owned by Walmart.
Yes,
So,
Asda.
but there isn't an Asda close by me, so I don't. But whichever supermarket you go in the UK, there is no shortage of cakes, biscuits, pastries.
Please.
Oh, hello.
Attention, please. The fire alarm test is now complete. Please
It took
respond to all
took that
future
long?
fire alarms.
And I think he might say it again. Is he going to say it again? No,
That-
okay.
That's kind of like a great way to end the program by saying, "Attention, please, we're completed."
We've been through an entire fire alarm test and a test of the voice activation emergency system since we've been on, but we survived.
Yes, and as that's happened, the sun has gone down. It is now dark outside, and the temperature is plummeting because our humidity is low. So
Okay.
we're going to
Good.
be down into the upper 40s tonight. So,
That sounds refreshing.
yep, the windows are open. So,
Good.
but that's our episode for tonight, and we are now booked through October, the middle of October. Thank God, because I don't have to pester people. Because I didn't have to pester Nick that long. So,
Good. I'm glad it was an easy one.
yeah, there aren't many now. I might make this a quick thing with social media, because you're on Twitter, you're on now Google Plus, because I got you on that. And you need to put. I wonder, would the Met Office allow you to put your stuff on a Google Plus account?
What stuff?
Your forecasts or whatnot.
Um, Probably not.
Ah, now we found some. That's a little tidbit now.
Probably not. I had to get permission to do this, Jeff.
Ooh, from who? The Martin Young guy? Or from the
No.
BBC head?
Both actually. I had to get permission from my Met Office boss here in London, and I have a BBC boss here in London, and I had to get permission from both of them to do this.
He had to suck up to them too.
I didn't give them a shout out, so I didn't have to suck up too much.
Okay, but anyway, so we have our guests and our first foreign guest. So Nick at least has some accreditation that he's our first foreign guest.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So you can run along and do the shipping forecast that's dull and makes people sleep.
And I'll be asleep not too long after that as well. Until I'm back for another night shift on Sunday night, doing a slightly different role. I'm doing a forecaster role rather than a presenter role on Sunday night. So I'll be looking after some of the charts and briefing some of the other presenters when they come to work on Monday morning.
Yeah, well, that might be a lot easier than, or maybe not. So,
Well,
but
it's
anyway,
different.
yeah. But anyway, so this has been the 24th episode or issuance of Polygon. We thank you for joining us, albeit in this country, any other country, any time of the year, be it if there's snow on the ground or whatever. So, have a good weekend next week. God bless everybody. Good night. Whatnot. Hooray, hurrah. So, now I got to stop the broadcast. Goodbye, everybody.